Welcome to Radio Multe. A very new non-commercial
very new
community,
a very new
radio Alwynne Pritchard and I live from 114 Radio Multe.
And for this special transmission, we are live streaming. We are live streaming this AM and FM, this and video.
City center. In the shadows, through our frosty door of people in a chilly evening on a Sunday in the dark. The Ministry of Culture. Ministry of Culture. Ministry of Culture. The Ministry of Culture decides The Ministry of Culture decides whether the following conditions are met. Ministry of Culture decides whether the following conditions are met. Ministry of Culture decides. The Ministry of Culture decides whether the following conditions are met. Ministry of Culture decides. Whether the following conditions are met. Milestones for the digitization of radio in Norway. And the possible FM switch off. Radio. Multe
is named.
Multe. Cloudberry.
After
Radio.
the
Radio. Multe.
Cloudberry.
After. Cloud.
You.
Radio. Multe.
You are
Cloud.
hearing
Berry.
the
Berry. bucket,
sounds of,
cloud, berry,
of,
named,
of,
bucket,
cloud,
berries,
or,
named,
or,
multe, multe,
falling,
bucket, you, Norwegian,
into,
named,
during,
harvest, you,
a few months
bucket,
ago,
low, humble, berry,
for those
berry,
who,
cloud,
for who
multe,
don't,
amber,
know
raspberry,
The cloudberry,
looks like,
or
orange,
multe
cloud,
as
mossy,
It
humble,
is
berry,
named,
orange,
in
sour,
Norwegian, the
humble,
berry,
ground,
like an orange,
amber,
orange,
berry,
amber,
cloud, berry,
the as
druplet,
ground,
mossy,
humble,
low,
low,
bucket,
low,
rhizomes,
mossy,
spread,
ground, rhizomes, spread
peat,
far and
popping, soil,
under,
air, under,
popping,
berry,
popping,
into the air,
an
array,
interesting antenna,
popping,
array,
humble,
on,
mossy,
stems,
stems, stems,
stems,
5 centimeters,
in the air with a
rhizome,
white,
ground,
like a cup,
hand,
flower,
berry,
on top, the berry
antenna,
sits
the weather,
number of
drupelets,
on each berry
the rain,
depends on don't
the peat,
on the weather, don't like
soil,
rain,
the ground,
too much rain,
peat,
multi,
cloud, berry,
multi-love,
rhizomes,
grow in alpine,
tundra,
Arctic,
grows,
especially
rain,
peat,
cold,
cloud, anaerobic,
peat, anaerobic,
and
peat,
so things
cupped,
do not
stem,
decay,
anaerobic,
decay makes
peat, berry,
soil,
peat, berry,
an acidic soil,
drooplet,
multi-loves
wild,
this,
fertilize,
peat berry,
flies,
domesticate,
Arctic, tundra,
female plants,
packed
fertilized by
with vitamin C,
domesticate,
tundra,
flies,
wild, berry,
harvest, and fincer by the
peat, tundra,
they are packed
cloud,
with vitamin C and
bucket,
so
wild, flies,
as
multe,
sour,
humans,
raspberries,
rhizome,
sour,
fertilize,
with sugar,
sweet,
imagine
flower, a single
rhizomatic
rhizomatic,
underground,
a top,
a rhizomatic underground,
atop, the soil,
system,
underground,
system,
antenna,
a single flower, stem atop it,
as though it came out,
stem atop a cloud berry,
a peculiar berry, this peculiar fruit,
this peculiar fruit,
as if from out of the clouds, this peculiar fruit,
as if
clouds, berry, fog. Are very radiophonic atmospheres. Qualities of being on the air. Words and sounds flying through the air. Bumped and tossed by the wind. They say radio is like a fog. A wonderfully fertile fog. Thick, misty air. Navigating through the fog. Not knowing where you're going. Or how much distance between here and there. You can't trace who's listening to the radio. Calling out into the night. In the clouds. And grayness. And crackling sounds. Sometimes calling out into the night, in the clouds, sometimes and crackling, hearing a response. I'm here. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? This mingling in the air. vibration. Calling out in the mist. As if in the clouds. Dispersed. Reaching out. Reaching out. This mingling in the air. Expanding. Light. We become with each other. We become each other. In the fog. In the fog. In Radio Multe. This is the sound of natural radio as recorded by Stephen McCreely. Wild radio. Unlike the domesticated radio of the AM and the FM, honoring the wild electromagnetism, riding it, in the spirit of Radio Multe, the wild berry of the cloud. Thank you for being part of this simultaneous natural radio, FM, AM, and live streaming video. Thank you to Tonspur Kunstverein Wien for this invitation, MuseumsQuartier. This is Karen Werner and Alwynne Pritchard, live from Radio Multe, Nygårdsgaten 52 in Bergen, Norway, with a door to the street. You're welcome to pop in. Thanks to Bertha Chan for video live streaming. Thanks as always to Georg Weckworth in Vienna at Tonspur for wonderful creative support. And to Hannah Schwegler for technical support. Soundbed created for Radio Multe by Gregory Whitehead, who has also inspired these thoughts about radio as a kind of fog. Radio Multe is now broadcasting every Saturday from 10 to 12 on the AM and FM dials in Bergen, 93.8 FM, 1314 kilohertz AM, and at radiomulte.live, with additional special broadcasts. And now, we are ending today's live stream performance, live from Radio Multe. Good evening from Radio Multe. So we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A now. I received some questions from Georg Weckworth at Tonspur, and we're excited to talk about them. So Alwynne, I'll ask you a question. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to Bergen.
Well, it was 22 years ago, and I was doing my master's I was doing my PhD actually at Bristol University, and I had for a very short time a Norwegian boyfriend there. And it was a very short relationship, but what was very huge about it was that I think it was, I know it was because of that kind of small tenuous connection I'd started to form to Norway, that the what was then known as the British Music Information Centre said, they called me up and they said, well, we were thinking we were asked to nominate someone for a residency at this place called the USF Kulturhuset USF in Bergen, and that was in 1999 actually. So I said, great, I would love to be nominated for this, and and I ended up coming then in 2000, and it changed my life actually. I just thought the place was wonderful, and then I came back in 2003, and then I ended up getting a job here in 2008. So I moved here probably in 2008, but my heart was here really from the first moment I came in 2000. Yes.
That's exciting.
What about you?
I moved here in March 2020 to do a 4-year artistic research fellowship at the Art Academy in Bergen, KMD.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have a lot of infrastructure around artistic research, a lot of support for the arts, a lot of resources, institutions, financing, cultural investment in the arts, which I've been quite impressed by.
Yeah, it's fantastic actually. Coming back then, I think it might be worse now, but even back then, coming from the UK to here, it was astonishing the number of different artistic institutions there were, the number of artists that there are working in different disciplines, and how, because the city is it's actually much bigger than it looks when you're here, because it's got the mountains around the centre of it. So a lot of the kind of, and then there are tunnels and roads and things going out into the suburbs. And they have cultural, of course, they have culture centres and things out there, but really the hub of activities in the centre. Mm-hmm. And it says walkable 15 minutes to anywhere. So people really, there's a lot of intermixing, not just across kind of different, let's say, musical genres, if you want to define it like that, but across different disciplines. And, you know, I go from the literature house to the art museums and you see a lot of the same people at a lot of things. And I think it's great, that for exchange of ideas. And
yeah, it's pretty wonderful. Yeah, I was just going to say yesterday, my day consisted of a live broadcast performance at the radio station, which was part of a conference at Bergen Electronic Kunst, Beck. And from there, went to a performance that you were doing at Lydgallery, at the Sound Art Gallery, then went to a Pixel Fest, kind of a critical engineering work group presentation. From there, went to another Beck event, and that was a bit of and then tonight, I'll talk a little bit more about tonight, going to see a performance at the Grieg Hall. But yeah, there's a lot going on in a very concentrated amount of space.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to say a little bit, based on some of your professional, really amazing positions within Bergen? Georg had asked a question about how heterogeneous the art scene is in Bergen, and you've been part of Bit 20 as artistic director, and in Borealis artistic director as well. Two amazing sound and music related festivals and organizations. And so from that vantage, do you want to elaborate on more about what you've seen about the artistic scene and how heterogeneous it is in Bergen?
Yeah, I mean, when I very first came here in 2000, well, I think it was actually the second time I came, maybe, in 2003, and I was actually working a little bit for Radio 3 then. I was a freelance writer and presenter there. That came back. One of the first things I remember doing here was doing an interview with Jon Hegre and Jürgen Tran, a couple of kind of noise musicians, I guess, living here. And Jürgen's a very well-known producer. So that was kind of one of my first entries into the scene. I was kind of meeting those people and doing some interviews with them, as well as I was actually finishing writing an orchestral piece up in the USF. So I was like involved in I was involved in kind of rather different activities there. But when I came back in 2008, then I was artistic director of Borealis, which of course is a festival. It's very international, and even back then, even before my time, it was bringing together a lot of. I mean, it even had. I don't think it has it anymore, but Nicholas, who was running it before me, and then I continued. There was a literature strand running through the festival. So there's always that, which would take place at the Literature House. Didn't exist then, but it was happening in the library. And so and now, of course it's kind of got bigger and bigger actually. But during my time, it was already bringing together. We didn't really have a kind of we didn't want it to look like a particular kind of festival. We wanted a lot of people to get together and listen and think and talk. But what's interesting then is Bit 20, who's that's members of the symphony orchestra who also play. They formed a contemporary music ensemble, which is also kind of diverse. It does, it's kind of doing a lot of rather different things. And today they're playing Olga Neubert. You're going to talk about that anyway. But that's kind of very much kind of in the, like, let's say the standard kind of repertoire that they would do. But they also they do a lot of other very different projects too. So for me, I was working with two institutions which were rather different, in fact, and then formed my own music theatre company, Neither Nor, and I perform at the theatre festival and the dance festival here. I performed at the literature festival this year. Wow. So it's, and they are very, very different things. It's not like everybody's in the same place, but they are very different. But people can talk and they can share ideas and they can present work at different institutions, I mean, there are so many fantastic organisations here and so many fantastic artists. Yeah.
Super. Georg asked a question about what COVID is like these days. And we were reflecting before that, it really does depend your particular experience on maybe what your life is like if you have kids, etc. But I think in the broader understanding that right now, as Georg is asking this question, Vienna and Austria are having quite a big lockdown, and we're not having that here. Although it's so it's a little bit less intense here than in Vienna right now, I would say. And I've been learning about Norway culture the entire time I've been here has been during COVID. Moved here basically just 2 weeks before things really unfolded. So it's been interesting. It seems like a fairly non-reactive response compared to other places. So, basically it's not disastrous at the moment, but it's getting a little bit intense at the moment too. Another probably wave is emerging. Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think I know people who have gone out of business last year, and I know a lot of artists have found it very hard, but I also know that the support for artists has been there here. So I think it's probably been a lot better for artists here than in the UK, say, for example. Yeah, and of course, it's much less densely populated. So when you're told to keep your distance and you actually live, I mean, I live in a house with my partner with a big garden. You know what I mean? It's like people are very, very lucky here that a lot of people have some space to kind of retreat to. And I think, of course, that makes a huge, huge difference. And people are not threatened so much by the situation because they know that the government, to some extent, is supporting people in this situation, So I think there's kind of less kind of rabid response than you've had in some cultures. Yeah.
Yeah. We were thinking of this as a segue to the next question that Georg posed, which was about what is the importance of radio in today's world, and how did you establish Radio Multe, where we are broadcasting today? I would say they're linked to this question's linked to the prior question because Radio Multe emerged out of a radio station that I started last spring out of my apartment, which I did during a lot of the most pressing lockdown that we experienced so far. And this was a way I did a daily narrowcast, kind of using my own transmitter to my neighborhood, a 20-block radius radio station called Skattegaten FM. And while doing that, got very excited about the idea of other people being able to transmit from there. Bergen Kommune, the municipality, had a grant for empty storefronts, received that with this idea for a radio station, and that's how this has emerged. And really, it's just in its third week, so it's all very fresh. And we launched, these are kind of ongoing iterations of launches and Radio Multe finding itself. And I would say that this station takes a lot of inspiration from a radio artist named Tetsuo Kagawa from Tokyo, who in the 80s set up a radio station called Radio Home Run. And it was a very beautiful vision of a radio station where the station is kind of a really key factor in bringing people together. And of course, this wonderful added convenience of a way of being with other people if we can't physically be together. Radio has this way of being kind of intimate, and it's kind of fun as well. There's something, maybe it's hard to pinpoint exactly why radio is fun, but it's this, I think, a very pleasurable way of being with others and exploring what community and communication can be. And then it's very important to mention, as we were referring to, that the FM dial in Norway is probably the most extreme on the planet in having been become an abandoned infrastructure. So we were trying to communicate this in reading the Ministry of Culture's report. It is literally an empty FM spectrum, and they're not giving out any more FM licenses. So we are using an existing FM antenna that we're renting and sharing with a couple of other groups, and kind of exploring what it is to be communicating in an abandoned, basically in a ruin. So I think there's a kind of a poetry and even a politics around that in thinking about radio technology and radio spectrum and an abandoned infrastructure that no one in Norway is happy about having been abandoned. So there's also a kind of playing in the abandoned field. And then a final question is about Vienna. I'm just going to see the time. Okay, so this last question is a personal question. Georg wrote, "Your artist in residence in Vienna was 4 years ago when you worked with your artist practice on a personal project. What is your memory of that time? Are you still preoccupied with your two-part sound work, Haus, which is about your Viennese family who fled from Nazis, and the house at Novara 40 in Vienna in the 2nd District, where they lived a long time and became a so-called collective house, where more than 200 fellow Jewish citizens were deported and murdered." So, yeah, I want to just say first, my memory of that time was that it was an extraordinary time, and I have ongoing gratitude to Tonspur and to Georg and to MuseumsQuartier for making that project house possible, and also to the people who live at Novara 40. It was incredible to meet the people in the house and meet other artists, including Jewish artists in Vienna, and to work together on these 2 sets of pieces and then do a show together. It really was an extraordinary collaboration and time that I'm a little astonished that I had the opportunity to be part of. And it's very interesting because guess what is happening tonight? We're going to have a little bit of break after this interview, this Q&A, and then walk over to the next block, to the Grieg Hall, where they're doing a screening of the film Die Stadt ohne Juden, or The City Without Jews, which was made in 1924 in Vienna and restored over the last couple of years through the Austrian Film Archive. So they're doing a screening, and the composer Olga Neuwirth is her score to the silent film is going to be performed by Bit 20, and I'm going to actually be speaking on stage with 2 others just to give a little bit of a context for the film in Norway, in Bergen, for the audience here. So it's an interesting transition to be transmitting and being with Tonspur and Vienna right now, and then transitioning and going back in time to 1924 and watching that film, which is kind of a dystopian, very heavy humor, heavy Jewish humor, and envisioning a future in which all the Jews have been removed from Vienna, which ended up being quite a predictive film without meaning to be. And yeah, I mean, it's still with me, and thinking a lot about the role of art making. I think there's a lot of issues of the transmission of memory that have affected wanting to work with radio as a medium, and issues of time and space, the ways that time and space are not linear, but can kind of all exist all at once, and that are a huge part of, I guess, just my being, and thinking about the simultaneous experiences of history all at once. It's very pointed, my experience of that when I'm in Vienna, and so thinking about that in a different city, in Bergen, which has its own historical issues and present issues and future issues. So, just really grateful to art as a space for exploring these kinds of things, that are very meaningful personally and politically, and what are the possibilities for repair through the kinds of work and collaborations that we make. So on that note, anything you want to add, Alwynne?
Only that it's been really a pleasure to collaborate with you again. Really great. Yeah, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks. Thanks again to everybody, and another shout out to Bertha Chan. All right. Good night.
Good night.